Hello, hi. I'm not sure who's in the room just yet. Ruth and Sam, are we ready to go ahead?
Yeah, I think so. Yeah.
Yes,
Great, great.
absolutely.
Fantastic. Thank you all so much for joining us today. It's great to see so many people in the room and to have everybody coming in to listen to what we think is a really important topic. So I'm joined on the call by Ruth and Ruth from Discovery and Sam Jackman from Boost, which is actually one of the innovations the NHS Innovation Accelerator supports. So we'll get them to introduce themselves in a little bit. So we've broken this webinar into 5 sections, and this is really sort of, we make sure we're covering everything that we think you need to share, you need to understand and hear. And we're going to start off by kind of setting the scene so that you understand, what is it we like to cover. So telling you a bit about ourselves as well as what we think matters, and then going into kind of more deeper parts about the kind of why listening matters, what listening actually is in action. So it's not just, I think, hearing something and getting it in, but it's what you need to do about it. And then they give you some kind of practical guidance about it. And then you can also do a Q&A at the end. So feel free to kind of pop your question, into the question and answer section, and we will pick them up as we go. Okay, great. So just to say that this is being recorded. So if at any point in time you put anything in the question and answers, we'll try and make sure not to make it identifiable to you. There we go. So this is about the NHS Innovation Accelerator, and this is who I am. So I'm Mindy Simon. I'm the NHS Innovation Accelerator co-director, and we are an NHS England funded program, and then we help the NHS address its challenges. So it's kind of flipping it in a way. Most people think we are looking after just innovators, but we're really here just to help the NHS. And we do this by recruiting and assessing innovations and then supporting innovators who represent those innovations to understand about the health system and also to navigate the health ecosystem. So we look for innovations that are already in use somewhere in the world and support them through the journey as they try to kind of accelerate their adoption into the NHS, which I think anybody else who's worked with the NHS will know it is very, very difficult. And we do this through kind of direct connections with kind of really key stakeholders, sort of bespoke support around key areas the NHS would expect innovators to consider, like health inequalities and net zero, which is not necessarily something as an innovator you'll be thinking of, but the NHS will be asking you to look into that. And we also make sure that our innovators hear what's happening within the system, because they need to understand what's going on around them so they know how they can adapt themselves. And then there's also the kind of mentoring part and peer-to-peer support. So we've been doing this for over 10 years, and we provide what we consider is a very comprehensive support package over 3 years. What we say to the NHS is that our offering is not only to those innovators, but is that we're doing the hard work of sourcing those kind of excellent innovations and supporting those innovators so that the NHS can have a one-stop shop where they can find innovative ways to address whatever issue it is that they're facing. And I'm hoping most of you here would have heard of us, and that this webinar can help you understand some of the kind of key areas that you need to address that will kind of get you to the stage where you can apply to us next year. So I'm now going to pass you on to Ruth, who's going to tell you a bit about Discovery.
Hi everyone, my name's Ruth Cousins and I'm co-founder and CEO of a business called Discovery. We're a not-for-profit business and we spun out of the University of Cambridge just over 2 years ago, so in 2023. And what we do is we do large-scale qualitative research, gathering feedback and expertise and insights from patients and from staff and from members of the public in a way that's targeted to support our clients to have useful information to help them make business or change-related decisions around innovation and new technology. So we're really focused on giving our clients really useful information from patient, staff and the public in order to ease that transition into wide-scale adoption of innovation. Oh, next slide, please, Mindy. So just for a bit of context, these are the kinds of organisations that we work with. So we come from an academic background and we still very much work with academic partners, including our former colleagues back at the University of Cambridge. We also work in the system, so we do a lot of work with Royal Colleges, but also PCNs, for example, ICBs and other kind of NHS system organisations. We've done a lot of work recently with the third sector, including Alzheimer's Research UK and RNIB. But I suppose most relevant, I hope, for today and for this audience of people is that we also work with commercial businesses. So very often these are businesses, early stage businesses, who are looking to gather insight from patients and staff and the public to validate their business propositions. But we're actually going to talk a bit later about a piece of work that we're doing in partnership with Bristol and with the very big firm Mölnlycke, which is around a very common product used in NHS, which is wound dressings. So we work with all those groups of people. And I'm going to hand over to Sam to introduce herself.
Hi everyone, I'm Sam and I am an NHS Innovation Accelerator Fellow, which is really exciting for us. And I am the founder of Boost Breast Forms, and we create a different type of breast prosthesis to this one. So this is the one that was widely available with a design that had been unchanged for quite a few years. We think back to the 1970s, and it's a silicone gel encased in a polyurethane film, and it has a load of problems with wearability and the design. And we created Boost as an alternative, so it's lightweight, it's breathable, it's more comfortable, and it's fully recyclable. And it also offers different options for different skin colours and all the different things that this one doesn't, essentially. So we are the creators of a product which we are now selling into the NHS. And the reason I'm here today is because I'm a really big, passionate advocate for human-centered design and co-creation, because I think it is just the vital foundations from which to start an innovation journey. And the reason that I think that is because I would not have known that this was such a problem until my mum, who had breast cancer, told me how much of a problem it was. And even then I thought it was just my mum. And then I went out into the world and found out there were lots of other women who felt the same way she did. So really, although our journey was quite accidental in that co-creation space and in having those conversations, it was one that was massively beneficial for us to build our business on. And so it's great to see you all today. And thank you for having me.
Great. Thanks so much, Sam. Thanks so much, Ruth. So we're going to go through what we think is that kind of why listening matters piece. And we've broken it down into sort of little sections. And I think always great to break everything down, because then it helps you also understand in a sort of not a checklist, because it's not exhaustive, but it's a great way for you to kind of keep in mind the kind of basics of what you need to do. There's always going to be more, but let's just start off with this. So Ruth, do you want to go ahead?
Yeah, so I'm going to start off actually very much where Sam just started off, in terms of understanding the problem. And so I think any of us who've had any kind of formal training around innovation, I think Innovation 101 teaches us to fall in love with the problem rather than the solution. And it's really hard to resist the lure of embracing a new technology and then finding a problem to solve with it. But really great innovation starts with understanding the problem and the needs of the end user. So in our case in healthcare, it's around patients and indeed around staff as well. So in particular, I think that listening to staff and patients at this stage not only can help you to describe problems, but can also help you to focus in on which are the problems that are most important to patients and staff. So resources are limited, and you might have a fantastic solution to a real problem, but if that problem is number 9 or 10 on a list of 9 or 10, then it's unlikely to be allocated time and resources. So it can help you with prioritizing as well. I think another really important dimension is equity. So we all know that the experiences and outcomes of care can vary wildly depending on a wide range of social determinants. So where you live, your economic status, your cultural background, and you really need, as innovators, to solve for the widest possible group of people and not deliver a solution that only works for a minority, or even worse, deliver a solution that deepens inequality. So it's really important to understand what everybody needs and not just what some people need. And I think this can sometimes be really difficult for patient and clinician innovators, because you do have an intimate knowledge of the problem, but sometimes it's important to recognize when you only have one perspective on that problem rather than a wide range of perspectives. Sam, I'll hand over to you.
And drawing nicely on from there, designing for your users, you're not designing for yourself, or for the kind of assumptions or bias that you might bring to the table. I wasn't designing this product for my mum necessarily, even though it was my mum who first brought that problem to me. It was wider than that and bigger than that, and we needed to engage with people before we made those critical decisions, and importantly, before we spent lots of money going down one pathway of another. And designing for your users means that you really need to be prepared that things take you off in a way that you didn't expect to go down, because what they say really matters and it has weight. And I think that designing for your users is something which is literally the bedrock of what you need to do as an innovator, is really finding out what people need and how they want that thing to happen, because it's likely to be pretty different to what you might have already had in your head or your brain as a way to solve a problem. And the way that they think about the problem, the way that they communicate about that problem, the way that they might be already solving that problem in their daily life might be something that you've never come across before. So having that engagement with your users from a really early stage, I think, is absolutely vital in any innovation journey. And Ruth spoke just now about being trained innovators or trained product designers, and that, or even having a clinician bias or a user bias yourself, and that is really, really relevant here. And unfortunately, because of the background that I came from, which I used to work in museums and heritage, which was completely different to where I am now, that already gave me that kind of, oh, I'm not going to know anything about this kind of mindset, which actually was a useful place to start. Now I recollect on it, although it was quite difficult at the time. So designing for your users is a super important thing, and finding those ways to pull out that information from those groups of people that you're talking to, that's the trick, that's the way to do it.
So moving on to building your evidence base, I think that when people are building new innovations, you'll be thinking a lot about how to demonstrate the clinical effectiveness of your product or service, and you'll also probably be thinking about the economics, how to demonstrate the return on investment or savings. But also, particularly if you're planning, I think, to sell within the UK and within the NHS, it's really important that you collect this data on patient and staff experiences of your product in order to bolster your case with the people who will commission and pay for your innovation. And it can be a really, really powerful tool for making the case to commissioners and other stakeholders for the benefits of your product versus perhaps a different product or a previous legacy solution. And in some cases, we've even had clients who've used the work that they've done with us, gathering feedback from end users, to secure things like places on accelerators or funding from other sources, or even in some cases investment. And so actually building your evidence base for all of those different stakeholders, end user data is a really important part of that.
And that links really nicely to building trust and legitimacy, because if you are doing all of these things, if you're involving your end users in your product design from an early stage, in your solution planning from an early stage, then not only will you have that evidence, but you will be naturally building that trust and legitimacy. And importantly, you'll be doing that within your target user market. So for us in particular, when we started to work with women, we did co-design workshops across Devon and Cornwall with around 160 women who'd had breast cancer, not just a full mastectomy, but they'd had lumpectomies. And we went into those sessions with kind of art and craft activities, because we were aiming not to design the product, but just to hear what the problems were and what the functionality issues were and what their pain points were. And when we were doing that process, even the process of listening and focusing on your end user's voice is a way to build brand trust and legitimacy, which will come back to support you later on. And even now, some of the links that we've got with breast cancer groups, some of the grassroots charities that we work really closely with, it's back to sort of 7-8 years ago when we were doing those initial consultations, when we were just saying, tell us what you want us to do. And that has progressed on through our business model, which means that even the new products we develop, people do trust that we are building those new products with the voices of our end users in mind, because we have always had that kind of history of product development. And it also means that if people have an idea, if somebody, for example, from the trans community says, actually, I would like to wear a breast prosthesis and I don't want to wear those fleshy ones, I want to wear something different, then they've been able to come to us as well, because that's expanded into different user markets. Because again, because of that reputation that you can build with that empowerment model of empowering your users to get into that feedback loop and to work with you rather than be done stuff to, they're working with you.
And all of that together comes about, I think the thing that innovators care about most is about how do they accelerate their adoption and spread throughout whatever market they're looking for. Now, those users that you have spoken to, they're not just your audience, and they don't just feed into your product. They feed in as your adopters, and they will also become your advocates. They will be the ones who will talk about you to other users. Imagine all the times that you have heard one of your friends say, I use that, I thought it was amazing. It's exactly the same for your product. And they won't just be telling their friends or people within their kind of user group. They'll be telling their doctors and their clinicians, who will then tell the people within their commissioning units, etc. It is very much a trickle up rather than just a trickle across. So it's very much, you need that audience, then also that base of users and people and retailers who will come from them, and your shoppers. They are all the people that who have moved involved at some stage in there. And I think it also kind of feeds very much into what Sam was saying about the kind of trust piece. You have just shown all those users who become your advocates, and you can be trusted. And there's nothing more important than trust, I think, particularly with health innovations, because you don't want to use something that you're sitting there thinking, have they thought about my needs? Have they thought about anybody else's needs? So in your adoption and spread journey, not having a user involved will just completely cut you out. And I'll be honest, we as part of the NHS Innovation Accelerator, we want to support you, because we need to know that you have listened to users. I will say things like Innovate UK, NHS England, anywhere you get SBRI, there are whole sections there in your applications about what have you done with your users. And they're not looking for lip service, they're looking for authenticity. And if you can't say how you've listened and adapted, so not just heard, I've done 15 focus groups, but I've done absolutely nothing to change, that's not really listening. That is literally just ticking your box. So listen and adapt, and that will help influence who will take you up at some point.
And can I just one more thing that's just occurred to me is literally what Mindy said is absolutely right. Like our products, our Boost breast forms, are now available via the NHS. And the only reason that the NHS trusts are actually giving them out is because women are going in and requesting them, because they've heard about us in the breast cancer support groups, because those groups have been part of our journey from the beginning, and they're hearing about us from other women, and other women are wearing them, and then they're saying this is what you need if you want to go and exercise, you want to do swimming. And now we're available on the NHS. Patients are going and saying to their clinician, I would like one of those, please. And that is helping us have that adoption and spread. We would not be able to do it without those advocates who are trusting us, because they know that these products have been designed with them and for them. Because we're such a small company, we do not have sales reps, we do not have a huge marketing budget, we don't have those kind of plans in place. What we do have is a very loyal base of users who've been involved from day one, who know that this is the solution that they need. And then they spread that word to other people, and then they spread the word to the clinicians. So we are living proof that what Mindy said really, really works.
So really truthfully, if your bottom line, if all you care about is your bottom line, this will affect your bottom line. It'll make a product that users are going to think are so great, they will want to push it for you. As Sam's product has done, as Boost has been pushed through her users. So always listen, but always adapt as well. So let's see. Great. So we're going to listen to Listening in Action, which is about Sam's going to talk actually about how she's done this and what's come out about it.
So I think for us, listening in action was always about being really careful about our own assumptions and our own experiences, and making sure there was room within the community, within the settings, within the group sessions that we ran, to really understand and build that rapport and work out ways that we could draw out the key pieces of information from women who we were talking to about their breast cancer journey in the early stages. And from there, we have done other types of research and development activities that have very much been in a co-design space. We've worked with the trans community on their breast health journeys. We've worked with women who have larger breast form needs that are beyond the current sizes of these ones that you just can't do. We've worked with all sorts of different types of groups where breast form wearing might be people who just haven't had a lumpectomy. And I think the way that we do that is really very much driven by the way we design those activities. And we do use different types of techniques depending on how we're approaching that co-design work and what we want to find out from it. But usually those techniques are quite open. We've used things like IDEO cards. We've used things like what we call a cultural probe, where you can give a pack to somebody and it's like a snapshot of their life, and you can send that out in the post, and they just download everything that's been going on with their user experience, perhaps of wearing this in like a typical week, what's gone wrong with it, what's gone right, in a sort of diary, in a little notebook with some photos, with some and all these kind of things. And they can come back. There are different ways of doing workshops where you can be very careful not necessarily to lead your users down certain routes, but just to pose problems and then do a thematic analysis of those types of solutions, and to really understand. And the earlier you do those things, the better it is for the foundations for your product going forward, because at some point you do need to make creative decisions. You need to make informed decisions about, we had a lady in a workshop who made a mermaid boob, who covered her boob in sequins and made it all lovely. We had another lady who made what she called a zip tit, so she could put her bank card in there and scan it at the checkout. And you go through all this process, but and some of you let people be creative, you let them be ridiculous, but then you draw out, like, I want this to be more practical, I want this to be lighter, I want it to be X, Y, Z, and those things can be drawn out from those overall conversations or those completely bonkers ideas. There might be elements of those that you can bring into the conversation. Most importantly, it's good to know when you're wrong. We've had two particular projects which were both funded by Innovate UK. One of them went very spectacularly wrong, because when we were working with the trans community, we thought that we would have to redesign the dimensions of the product. We thought they might need to be wider because trans women tended to wear a wider back size bra, so we thought they might need to be wider for wider chest shapes. We thought we might have to work on the ratio between the projection and the chest. And we went and we tried the products on with a load of ladies from the trans community, and they all went, "These are great." And then we were like, well, we're only like, this is the beginning of the project. Everybody's tried the product on that we already had, and they all went, "These are great." And we're like, well, what do we do then? We've got this funding to make this new range of products that we don't need to make, because they actually just said, "These ones are great. These are fine. This range actually works for us." And we weren't expecting that. So then we said, well, what else can we do for you? What else would make this even better? And we ended up creating something else, which was a nipple attachment that goes in the middle, which sounds really, really funky. and it was brilliant and it worked really well. We had so much interest in it. It was great for social media, but we just listened, and it completely threw us for a while, because we had this funding to make this special product for the trans community, and we didn't need to make the product. What we just needed to do is give them access to the one we already had. So it all kind of went wrong, but being able to refocus and really take that on board and then listen and then go, well, now what can we do as innovators to really show that we've heard you and really show that your input is valued? How can we action that? We did another one with ladies who had a lumpectomy, and it turned out that the biggest problem in their lives wasn't actually getting an even shape in their clothing. The biggest problem in their lives was lying down to go to sleep, because it's quite painful when you lie down to go to sleep if you lie on your side. And what they really wanted was a great big beanbag cushion. And we actually prototyped like 6 different things, which included breast shapers and stuff. But the most popular at the end, when we did the showcase, was a cushion, a beanbag cushion. And that's just where it is. And that isn't something that we were able to manufacture. It wasn't something we really took up, but it was something that we've kept in mind and we've been working on ever since. So just being aware that people might take you down the pathways you're not expecting is absolutely fine. But that's why R&D funding is super, super useful, because you can do that in that kind of ecosystem of research and development. True research and development is iterative, it is messy, it can be tricky, but if you are really listening to people, then that actually really works to get you to where you need to be, or to expand your business model and expand your horizons as an innovator to think of things a bit differently. Is that all right, Ruth? Did I cover everything?
Amazing, so interesting, thank you. So I was just going to talk about one of the projects that we have done, and I wanted to share an example particularly of shaping a new technology. But we've chosen this one because it was funded actually by a charitable organisation, and that means that the results of this piece of work are publicly available to everyone, and we're really happy to share that either in the chat here or we'll share it afterwards. So this work was commissioned at a time where there weren't devices on the market for remote monitoring people who are living with kidney disease. But several manufacturers were developing them. So the charitable organisations, which was an organisation called What Works Wellbeing and the Q Community, commissioned this work because they actually wanted to make sure that patient and staff insights were available to all manufacturers to ensure that all devices had access to this really important end user information. And so the question that we were asked to kind of answer was, what factors in remote kidney monitoring are most important to patients and staff? And we co-designed, a bit like Sam was just describing, actually, we co-designed the research programme with patients and staff, and we recruited through the networks of our partners. And the results were really interesting for a number of reasons. So we were surveying and researching with both patients and staff, and as you can imagine, they had overlapping concerns, but they also had different concerns. And for an innovator, I think it's really important, because in a tool like remote monitoring, you have 2 sets of end users. So both groups were really, really important. Found that safety was really, really important, and that's completely understandable. And also both groups felt that preserving really effective personal relationships between patients and staff, even when using the technology, was really important. So people wanted to be able to still speak to each other and still have that personal human contact. But for patients, they were really, really concerned about having a device that was tailored to their specific needs, whereas for clinicians, a concern that was much higher up their list was around, as you might imagine, the remote monitoring increasing their capacity to see more patients and reducing their admin burden. So there were insights that from the piece of work that were really general. So like I said, patients still wanted a named person in charge of their care who they could reach out to, and they were concerned that having a remote monitoring device would take that out of the equation. But also there was some very granular information. So some people were really specific about how they wanted their information delivered, whether it was on an app on their phone, for example. And in a particular thing that I thought was really interesting insight was that they didn't want a separate app that was their kidney monitoring information. They actually wanted something that actually brought together all of their health information. So be that their kind of health information like weight or whatever, or be it like things like heart rate and those kinds of things. They wanted a one-stop shop. And both groups actually, and again on that granular sense, felt that home monitoring might increase some patients' anxiety about their condition and play into a tendency to kind of constantly monitor and worry about minor fluctuations. So I think by engaging at scale with a wide range of different participants and co-designing the research for them, the resulting framework actually gave a really rich range of insights, which actually wasn't just useful to device manufacturers, although it was, but also to people purchasing the technologies and also even to policymakers. And then if we can just go on to the next slide. So on a much quicker note, this is a project that's actually live at the moment, so I can't share results with you, but I just wanted to flag it because it's not just high-tech innovation that needs patient and staff input. This project that we're doing that I referred to earlier around wound care after caesarean birth is about a very prosaic, very ubiquitous product, dressings, and it might feel low-tech, but actually because caesarean is one of the most common surgeries every year, it has a really significant, huge impact. And some of the insights that we're seeing coming through about how women feel about their scars, how they felt about looking after their wounds immediately after giving birth and having a new baby and having to combine all of those things, actually is really generating some really interesting insight and some really significant impact. So moving on to the next one.
There's really looking at kind of practical guidance we're going to give you guys. So we've told you a lot about examples, and we'd like to actually just share with you things that you could think about as you're doing it.
So I think we've probably emphasized this top point enough, but it is a point that like it bears re-emphasizing, which is to start early and to include everyone. So engaging people very much, as Sam has just given us a really beautiful example of, from the concept stage, not when you've already, I mean, the example I often use, which is slightly offhand, is, you know, don't ask people when you've already got the full design whether they want a blue button or a yellow button. You actually need to understand from the beginning whether this thing is going to solve a problem for them. And then proactively thinking about using, about working with underrepresented groups. So I think the really important thing here is to realise that you as an innovator are not going to have access to all of the different types of groups from all the different types of communities that you might want to speak to. And so it's really important to build relationships, either with organisations that have those relationships themselves. So, oh, sorry, they're just in the caesarean project go in the chat, sorry, distracted me. So either with them, so there are organisations, for example, like National Voices, who represent organisations that have patient voice at their heart, or you can go directly to local voluntary sector organisations, to community organisations, reach out to people, engage people, and build trust with those people as well. One thing to think about when you're thinking about talking to particularly patients, but sometimes also staff as well, is around incentivization. Are you recognizing their skills and experience and the time that they've given you with some sort of compensation? And there's a lot of complexity around that, and it's worth thinking through. But at the same time, it's really important to acknowledge that people are giving you something of value to them and of value to you, and that should be recognized. So I think one thing I would really say is that people often get, I guess, put off by the scale, or thinking that they have to do something huge scale when they're engaging with patients and staff. And it almost stops them from even beginning. So I would say, and this is probably true of anything that you get up to in life, but specifically around this, just start somewhere. Starting somewhere is better than not doing anything at all. So even if you feel like you can only afford to do, or you've only got time to do, or resources to do a quite small thing. Oh, somebody in the chat is saying they can't hear. Can people hear me? Yeah? Yeah, Sam, you can hear me. okay, I'll just plow on, but people tell me if I'm if I'm not being heard. So yeah, just start somewhere, and it could be with a group of, like Sam's talked about, a group of patients that you know and you're close to already, or it could be reaching out to a voluntary sector organisation. Trusts have panels of patients that they speak to about this kind of thing all the time. So there are always people that you can reach out to help you with getting started. And then I think if you are a slightly bigger organisation, if you do have some resources and skills, resources and time and money, then you can reach out to lots of different organisations who can help you do, if that beautiful creative work that Sam describes feels like it's beyond you, there are actually lots of really great user-centred design organisations out there who can help you with that sort of thing, and it's probably not as expensive as you think it's going to be. If you want to do larger scale qual research, there are organisations like us. If you want to do focus groups or interviews, those can usually be set up locally. So there really are the people out there who can help you to pull together a combination of different pieces of work that are going to generate the insight that you need. And so don't be deterred, don't be put off by if you feel like it feels like a really big task. There's always somewhere you can start.
I'm going to talk about systematic and decision focused as their practical guide. So I am a big fan of approaching this systematically, although it might not have sounded like it earlier when I talked about sticking sequins on a mermaid boob, but we are very much a systematic and decision focused approach to research and development that is very embedded in how we do things. So setting clear questions that you want answered at each stage of the development, but maybe starting with something that's very open, like a how might we question, like how might we make a better breast prosthesis for breast form users? How might we make a prosthesis that's more suitable for the trans community? Like having a broad question at the beginning might also be a way to break down into what that actually means in practice with your users and with the people that you're working with. And remember that R&D and product development and designing solutions is an iterative process. So understanding the questions that you want answered, but then reviewing those as you go through those design, make, test and learn iterations will really help you to pull out the best from the users and to work towards a solution that would be the best fit for them. And remember, you never please everybody, so you just have to do as best you can for the majority of the people that you've been working with. See what you can do to fit in with what they have told you is their pain points and their needs. Milestones are really important. Understanding your milestones and checking your assumptions at each stage, tracking your changes. And I think the best way to do that is to have a Gantt chart for your research and development project. Have some way of laying that out. If you're not familiar with what Gantt charts look like or how they work or what you should be doing with them, then please go and find some tutorials. There's probably loads on YouTube. There's lots of information out there about how to make your Gantt chart, how to design your work packages so that make, test and learn cycle is in your structure. So you might start with a how might we question. You might make something based on some feedback people have given you, test it, you learn from it, you make something again, you test it, you learn from it. And having those structures with clear milestones where you take that time to reflect or you deliver a certain iteration at a certain point in your journey, that is really, really important. And then monitoring that at every stage. You can do that best with a Gantt chart. And also Gantt charts are essential if you're looking for external funding for your R&D process. If you're looking for Innovate UK or any of the external funders, they love a Gantt chart because it shows that you are de-risking your project management. So it's always really, really good to have that systematic and decision focused way of approaching that, but document it in a way that works for you. And I think a Gantt chart is the best way to do that. And understand that your stakeholders need to have that interaction with you as you work through those milestones and as you work through that process of make, test and learning, or as you work through your Gantt chart, or as you work through your plan, so that they can understand your decision making, because your decision making needs to be based on the evidence that people are giving you. It needs to be based on, we talked about evidence, we talked about users, we talked about gaining trust. Being systematic in your approach is the way to deliver those things, but also how you can communicate them to the people that you're working with, to the end users, to your stakeholders. And then you can understand exactly how you've got to the position you're in at the end of your R&D cycle, at your end of your R&D project. You can work back and see, this is how we got here, and this is the evidence that's showing us that this is a good product market fit. Do a Gantt chart. Do a Gantt chart.
Sam loves a Gantt chart, if you haven't picked that up. So I think Sam mentioned quite a few times about milestones. So that keeping people involved is like your milestones. If you've got several milestones, that milestone will start, and then throughout those rest of your journey, you know everybody else. That's just not the way it works. The only way you hit those milestones is by keeping people involved at every single stage. So it's not just the start, and it's not just lip service. It's not just, I heard from you at this point in time, and then everything else that happens afterwards won't be influenced by what you're saying. That's just really not authentic. And you need to be authentic if you're in this space. You need to make sure that people are with you on your journey, because when they start with you, they will keep you going. So that become your advocates. They become the ones who help you hit those milestones. They'll be the ones who will sell you in the end. It's all about that whole piece we've been talking about all along the way. It's about that building trust. And that authenticity has to be there. It's not just about one single point in time. It's about every single part of your journey. It's about building your relationships, because those relationships will then take you to different parts of your journey. So those patients will then take you to your clinicians, as we said before, and they will then take you to commissioners. So that keeping people involved is so vital. That single point in time piece where you just listen for like 10 minutes of a focus group, not good enough. And it's also the type of thing that when you are going to investors, you are going to funders, so people like Innovate UK, again, is SBRI, they're not going to be happy with, I listened to somebody at one point of my journey at the start of my innovation, and I changed one thing. Because along the way, the only way you can really innovate is by being iterative and changing as you go and responding to the needs of your users. And you can't do that if they're not involved and if you are not listening to them. So I think we've gotten to Q&A. I'm going to stop sharing while we do this, and we will look and see. I'm going to stop sharing. Yeah, there we go. There we go. We should be able to see all our users, and everybody's on the chat. So I'm just going to look through and see what we're seeing. Do you ever work with freelancers to support you with facilitation and interviews? Sam, I'll throw that up to you.
Yes, we do. But we might not work with freelancers who are product designers or freelancers who are facilitators. We might work with a local artist. We've worked really closely with a massage therapist who's done some facilitation about scar care with us, because it's a way into opening up early stage conversations. We have worked with a variety of people. We've worked with we specifically with the trans group project, we worked with facilitators that were from the trans community to help us bridge that gap, rather than just going in and going, hello, we make prostheses, do you want some boobs? Like, that's not appropriate. So what we did was we worked a lot through a charity organization who helped us to do that. So I think, yes, it is really nice to work with the right facilitator. It also gives you a chance to step back as the innovator and to really take stock of what's going on in the room, particularly if you've got a busy focus group going on. Using a facilitator who isn't anything to do with you and actually is kind of independent to the process can give you the chance to sit back and observe what's going on and look at the nuances of what's actually happening in that room and what you can pick up from that. And that can feed into your next design iteration, where then you can hone in perhaps on a particular issue that was raised, or you can delve in deeper. So I think actually facilitators, people who are interviewing, people who are running sessions for you, people who might have a more natural affinity with the community you're trying to, especially if they're vulnerable, especially if they've got particular needs and you haven't really reached into that space before, having somebody who can bridge that gap for you, I think that is a really important tool that you can use, and I highly recommend that people do, if they can, use facilitators, especially in very early stage conversations.
Okay, I'm going to throw out a question to Ruth now, actually. So it's, how can we hear from people who don't usually take part in surveys or workshops, and especially those kind of that are most affected by inequalities? I think there's quite a lot of underrepresented groups whose voices we just don't hear. So I'd love to hear how you think we can actually engage with them so we can hear their voices.
Yeah, so that's really a really important question. So at Discovery, we do the vast majority of our work online. So we're mostly an online agency. And the reason that we do that is actually because it does make participating in this kind of work really accessible for lots of people. So I wouldn't say it's an instead of the work that Sam's talking about, but it can be a really important addition to the work that Sam's talking about. And so particularly when you're talking about NHS staff, for example, the sort of types of stuff that you might be, we started to grow really large when we were all going through the period of COVID, and of course a lot of the work around COVID particularly sort of involved cleaning staff, for example, so who were responsible for all of those issues on wards, or perhaps porters, or even like perhaps outsourced caterers, or all sorts of people like that. And it's very hard. Those people don't get a day off to do a workshop with you about a particular problem, but they can participate online, and online gives people the ability to do it on the bus on the way home at 3 o'clock in the morning, or whatever it might be. And so if you find it difficult to access particular groups, sometimes doing things online can be a really useful shortcut to that. And it also makes it a relatively time efficient way of doing things. So we tend to not ask people to participate in things that are longer than sort of 15 or 20 minutes, because we understand that people are time poor and resource poor. And so if you've got some really interesting conclusions emerging from face-to-face work that you're doing, you can then check that with a much wider group of people by doing stuff online. Having said that, I want to go kind of back to my point that I made earlier around building trusted relationships with particular community groups. And also for us, it's around co-designing the work that we do. So we've done a couple of really interesting projects recently around, so one was with RNIB, where obviously we were particularly interested in designing for people with visual impairment, and then another project around Alzheimer's Research UK, where we were particularly interested in designing for people with symptoms of dementia or diagnoses of dementia. And in those instances, it was really important for us to spend time with and talk to those groups. So, and I would say exactly the same for you as an innovator. Reach out to those organisations. They have PPIE panels. They can put you in touch with people that you're trying to serve, and they will always or very often be ready, willing and able to help. I think obviously digital exclusion is a real issue, and I think that there are ways. I mean, I think we certainly have seen the kind of assumptions around kind of age equaling digital exclusion. So old people don't use, somebody asked me what my pet hate was the other day, and I said old people don't use the internet as an assumption, like that's not true anymore. But people quite often don't have access to the internet because they don't have access to Wi-Fi for financial reasons, or they don't have access to devices for financial reasons. And so and again, reaching out to Healthwatch has been a really good way for us of helping people to get access to the work that we do, because organisations like Healthwatch are very often in touch with the vulnerable communities in their area. So I think, I would say make the engagement really easy and accessible, however you do that. Reach out to the organizations that have the trust of the communities that you're trying to get in touch with, and offer lots of different types of opportunities. Like one type of opportunity is going to work for one person and a different type will work for a different person. So those would be my three things.
Excellent. Great. And Sam, I want to throw this one out to you now. If an innovator only has time to do one listening activity kind of really early on, what do you think that should be?
Oh, that's tricky. I guess that depends who your end user is and what kind of problem you're trying to solve. But I think that is difficult. I would say don't just you're not going to get very far with just one listening activity. And that you will probably have to plan for those iterative processes, and that maybe you might need to seek some funding to help you to get there. One listening activity, yeah, I find that really tricky, to be honest, because back to actually trying to reach harder to reach people, because quite often you need to go where they are. They're not going to come to you. You have to go to where they hang out. And that for us was at breast cancer support groups in the evenings after work, and people went there, and or they might just be, you know, at a specialist bra store, or they might be wherever they might be, but they're not actually often where you expect them to be. So only planning to do one listening activity, I think, is I think you might need to plan to do more than that, no matter how. But a listening activity doesn't need to be, as Ruth was saying, doesn't need to be perhaps a massively structured thing. It doesn't have to be a great big focus group. It doesn't have to be huge number, hundreds and hundreds of structured interviews with a researcher. There are different ways to do it. We did one at the Eden Project once, because we're in Cornwall. We did one at the Eden Project. We just asked the Eden Project if we could give free entry to anybody who wanted to come talk to us about their boob and their breast health and their prosthesis wearing, and they said, yeah, we can support you to do that. That'd be quite nice, we can do that. And they were very kind and they allowed us to do that. And so ladies just came and randomly, we just pitched up somewhere, we had a little space, we just sat there like making crafty things, and people just came and spoke to us, and got a free day at the Eden Project. So, you know, there's different ways to do it. You can be creative.
Sam just really answered two questions there that Ruth mentioned earlier about you need to adapt the way that you're interacting with these people. Sam did an Eden Project bit. And then there's also the point of it quite frankly cannot just be one activity you undergo. That is entirely true. And I hope that throughout this presentation, we have been very clear about that. Ruth, sorry I interrupt you. Please go ahead.
Just wanted to re-emphasize, which I think we have already said, that this is an investment that you are making for commercial return later. Like, so I think it's very clear that everyone on this call thinks it's the moral and ethical thing to do to engage with people, but it's not just that. It's about your bottom line. As Sam has said, this has resulted in sales for her. Like, having a product that works for your end users, whoever those end users are, is just saving you time and money that you would waste if you didn't otherwise do that. And unfortunately, we see a lot of that in the NHS. We see a lot of, or in health systems generally, we see a lot of products like the sort of, I don't know exactly how to describe it, Sam, but this kind of saggy, uncomfortable boob that that Sam is working to replace. And so, you know, yeah, I just wanted to sort of reassure people that even a little bit of time, a little bit of money invested at an early stage with these listening type activities is going to pay you back later.
And really, I am testament to that as well. I can remember when we first started, we didn't have any investment, we didn't have any money, because investors kept telling me it doesn't look like a boob, so women won't want to wear it. And we were like, what women? All the women who co-designed it with us will want to wear it. And then they started ordering them. And what we found is that for every one we sold at the very, very early days where we didn't have any money and I was working 3 other jobs just to keep us like going so we could make some product and get it out there in the world, every time we sold one, we then sold 3, because that one woman that was wearing it would tell 3 other women and they would order. and we didn't do any Instagram, we weren't doing any marketing, we did nothing, but we just kept having these little spikes in sales because, and we knew they were doing it, we could see them on the forums, we had the charities telling us they were doing it. One woman would buy it and then they would tell 3 others in their breast cancer support group. So, and that is because they knew and understood that the product was designed with them, and not just designed to sell at them. It was designed to genuinely solve the problems that they were having.
Ruth, I'm just going to give you one last question. So what are these signs that you think listening is becoming a tick box exercise rather than something meaningful? I think that happens quite often when people are rushed. But
Gosh,
what would be your kind of red flag?
I don't know if anybody else was lucky enough to be able to go to BMJ Future Health, which was held a couple of weeks ago, conference, but a patient innovator who's been on the NHS clinical entrepreneurship program was there. He spoke about going into, I can't remember if she was speaking of her own experience or an experience that somebody she knew had, of going into a room for an engagement listening exercise and being told off the bat before anything had happened that nothing was going to change off the back of this listening exercise because there wasn't the resources or the time or anything to do about it. They were just like, so, but unfortunately, poor quality engagement exercises don't normally telegraph themselves in quite such a direct fashion. But I think you've already said some of the things, Mindy, which is not getting back to people about what you heard from them, not talking to them about actually what changes have you made to your product off the back of the conversation with them, not iterating again with them at a future date. So, I mean, the very basic you said we did. I think that people who are genuinely listening and genuinely engaging with people actually want that conversation to continue, want that to be an ongoing dialogue, not just a kind of single point thing. I think not making some effort, however small, to go outside of your comfort zone in terms of the communities that you're talking to, or the I guess the sort of not just the communities, but also the range of experiences. So again, I'm thinking about Sam, thinking on one hand about people who have had either lumpectomies or full kind of breast removal, and then thinking about the trans community. There's lots of, reaching outside of your comfort zone, I think, is a real genuine. I've answered the opposite question there, haven't I, Mindy? But I think that's a real mark of a genuine kind of exercise.
So just looking at Q&A, I think there's a few that I can answer. So Jayshree, at some point you can contact me about becoming an NHS innovator. We don't need to talk about that here. You can my contact details. I think you've touched around this already, Ruth, but about the being able to access patients. This is about research. This is a slightly separate thing than listening, but there's a kind of question around the regulatory barriers around NHS implementation and accessing those patients. Now, you've talked about the kind of communities you could already speak to about it, but is there any kind of advice you can give around those kind of regulatory barriers?
So there are different ways of accessing. So it is possible to kind of access patients through NHS routes, but then you do have to go down a very particular regulatory route, and you have to have approvals from a set of particular authorities to do that. We do that sometimes with some of our clients, but actually more typically we go, as I've described, through networks, through our own, we have an existing crowd of people who've participated in projects before. It's about 13,000 people. So we use those people, we use social media advertising, we've been on the radio, we've done there are lots of interesting ways that for fairly low cost you can go out and reach people. But if you are looking specifically for patients in a very particular context that would require them to require you to recruit through a hospital or through a GP surgery, for example, there are regulatory processes to go through that, but it's perfectly doable. It just takes a little bit of extra time and resource.
Okay, great. I think we've got 2 minutes left. I will just bring back up our slides so that you can see our details as they come up. There we go. We should be sharing those now. And this will allow you to contact us as, I'm just kind of pushing it through. 1 second, it's taking a little bit slower pace. There we go. So this is the information about how you contact us. So you can connect with us, with Ruth at Discovery, and also with me through nia@uclpartners.com. I really hope you found this informative, and that you'll go away and think about it, and think about how, you know, either you're doing something really amazing and that kind of validates what you're doing, but then also will give you a chance to think about what you can do better. So thank you all very much for joining us, and please do get in contact, because we always want to make sure that innovation that's going out is actually being done correctly. Great. Thanks everyone for joining us.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.